exciting.
It is. And to all of those of you who do not have your cameras on yet, that's fine. You can leave your cameras off, or if you want us to personally talk to you like we're doing, you can do that while Jason finishes his dinner. Jason, go ahead.
Oh, I finished.
Oh, you did.
I finished. I did. I squeezed it in it was just beforehand. We're doing it at this time because of my two small children and they're to be put to bed. So here we are.
Fabulous. Well, why don't we get started? Yeah.
Okay. Well, my name is Gail Mishkin. I'm from Flintridge Bookstore, and we are the bookstore that's hosting this event for Corey and Jason. And I just wanted to welcome everybody.
Corey.
Huh?
It's really for Corey.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
And Jason. And Jason.
It's really for Corey, but
it's like Big Handsome Man and his little friend in this case.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are pleased to present actor, visual effects producer, and author Corey Rosen, who will be discussing his book, Your Story Well Told, with director, writer, and producer Jason Weiner. There's going to be a Q&A at the end. I think we might have enough people here that are coming that we might ask everybody to just wait till the end for the Q&A, but you can submit your questions in the chat box and we'll be addressing them later in the program. And just so that you know, Corey's book is available through Flintridge Bookstore, and we are in La Cañada, which is in Southern California, just north of downtown LA. And I'll put links into where you can buy the book and also share information about our phone number and our address. And so I just wanted to introduce both of our speakers today. So here goes. Emmy Award-winning writer Corey Rosen is based in San Francisco. He is a regular host of the Moth Story Slam series in the Bay Area, and his stories have been featured on the Moth Radio Hour and the Back Fence PDX main stage. Corey began his career writing for Jim Henson Productions and Comedy Central in New York City. As an actor, Corey can be seen as a main stage company player at Bats Improv, where he improvises feature-length plays. His film credits as a VFX artist include Iron Man, Grindhouse, Ted, and The Phantom Menace. He recently wrote the script for a ride film at a Chinese theme park. Corey's book, Your Story Well Told, Creative Strategies to Develop and Perform Stories That Wow an Audience, discusses how you, as a writer, can take advantage of the techniques of applied improvisation to get past telling the same stories and find stories worth telling from your own life. Samantha Harris, co-host of Dancing with the Stars and Entertainment Tonight, says, Corey Rosen's book is a great resource. I know I will return to it again and again for ideas, inspiration, and entertainment. Jason Weiner has worked in both television and film and is best known for directing the award-winning pilot episode of ABC's Modern Family, as well as many others to follow. He served as the show's producing director for the first season, for which he received Emmy, Peabody, PGA, and AFI awards. Weiner's first featured directorial debut was the movie Arthur, starring Russell Brand and Helen Mirren. His second film, Ode to Joy, starred Martin Freeman. He has written and directed several TV pilots, as well as creating and executive producing shows all across the major networks. He graduated from Northwestern University, where he honed his improv skills in the acclaimed comedy group, The Meow Show. He is also an alumnus of the Improv Olympic Theater in Chicago. He began his career as an actor, improviser, and photographer before making the transition to directing. So please join me in welcoming Jason and Corey.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much. I'm going to change that up and welcome everyone. Hey, Jace.
Hey.
How are you?
I was just hearing the intro about and feeling like we should say RIP and pour one out for Improv Olympic. It is no more.
That's true. Yeah. RIP.
You know what I mean?
It's all Improv Olympic, LA and Chicago. It's
all closed. They couldn't make it through this thing. I don't mean to start on a down note.
It gives us somewhere to go. It gives us an upward trajectory.
Yeah, that's right.
Start at the bottom. Yeah.
I mean, before we start, we should really say that we've been friends for 30 years. since
30 years. I actually have a picture of us.
yes.
Yeah. This was a picture of Jason and I. Do you want to talk about this picture? You remember?
It was taken on my Pentax K1000. I have it right here.
You have the camera? We're gonna actually
Actual camera, yeah.
this is not pre-planned for those of you in the audience.
No,
That's Jason in the tie.
this is a different lens,
Yeah.
but this camera, I need to thank my parents who were on this Zoom
Yeah.
for the camera that took that picture of the 2 of us in the snow. I'm pretty sure that's it's Waiting for Godot influenced.
Very heavily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a production that we did. Well, were you involved in that one?
I directed this one. This was the one with Makiko.
No, wait. Oh, wait. No,
This
that's
was not Waiting for Godot.
You
This was
directed the film.
the film. Yeah.
Oh, I just might have borrowed some of my wardrobe from Waiting for Godot.
Oh,
is what I'm saying.
way.
The bowler hat. Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. And this was on the beach in Chicago when we were shooting film, and that was 30 years ago or so. So here we are.
Some of us have longer hair.
We have some
we're both wearing
pandemics to thank for
glasses.
that. We're both
It's
wearing
different.
glasses.
Yeah.
We've aged well, I think.
Listen.
Yeah.
And if nobody else is going to say it, we will.
I think so. So here's what I thought sort of had in mind to talk about tonight, Jake.
Yes.
This whole thing is kind of framed around something kind of exciting that happened during the pandemic, which is
my friend wrote a book, and I am really proud, and that's why we're here.
Yeah,
I really am.
Yeah,
I'm kind of giddy about it. It exists. You wrote a book. It's published. There it is, and it's available at Flintridge.
Flintridge.
And that's why we're celebrating.
And in the chat, Gail will put how, if she already look at that on it, how you can have your own signed copy of this book if you get it through Flintridge, and so what I thought we would do tonight is the following. I thought that we would tell some stories. I thought we would basically talk about, like, tell maybe our own stories, but also just kind of talk about, stories in the real world, like maybe how we have told stories beyond like stories that are in this book, but like the ways that we use stories in our lives. What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think that what's incredible about the book, and I was thinking about this as I was rereading some of it, it's like you wrote like a how-to tell a great story book, okay? And it's tilted a little bit towards like live performance, because that's what you do. But like throughout the book, there's a ton of other applications for storytelling.
Yeah.
You talk about how it can help you in a presentation. You're constantly thinking of the different ways different readers might use or interpret this advice. But that's the thing. You never present it as advice. You tell your own stories from your life, and then you break them down a little bit. But the reason the book is fun to read is because of those stories.
I hope so. And
I don't want to give it away, but I mean, it opens with the story of Corey getting punched in the face.
Which everyone wants to do. I think Stuart Title has wanted to do it at least once, and Glenn Powell twice.
Perfect story to start the book, because it's attention grabbing, and yet it's humble. I mean, you got punched in the face.
So, well, let's talk about that. So I open the book with a story that opens with getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? Is that a good way to start a story?
Well, here's what's great about it structurally.
Okay.
You didn't just open with that story, but then you go back to it and you use it different ways. I love that we hear Henry, your son's retelling of the story.
Yep.
So you switch perspectives. You give us a Rashomon, if you will, of that story. And you give us an example of how it could be told differently.
Yeah. Because that's what I think. I mean, that's something that I kind of love about storytelling in general, is that it sort of has this effect where either there's sort of the Rashomon effect, which is that multiple people who might have been there would be like, well, I don't quite remember that the same way. And then they tell their version of a story.
Right.
Or like I almost wanted to do that when you were talking about the picture on the beach. I wanted to cut in and tell about, well, this is what was really happening in that story. And then Adrian Wenner will have his whole version of what was happening in that. Hi, Betsy. I can't help myself. I have to greet people as they arrive. But also, there's of course the thing where people, you hear a story and they go like, "Oh, it's funny you say that because that reminds me of something else," and then that's kind of conversation. But it's also like how we communicate. Like we communicate through stories, and I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, since Wenner just arrived,
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't it feel like we should just be telling stories about Adrian Wenner right now?
So, I think this is just another roast. Didn't we just roast you? How many years ago was that? I feel like that was only like less than 30, right? How old? Okay.
Adrian Wenner was in the Meow Show with us
Yeah.
at Northwestern,
Mm-hmm.
and was my roommate after college.
Yeah.
Right. He and I drove to Los Angeles together, and
Tell me
slept
about
head
that.
to toe in the same bed, head to toe.
You had one bed. This was in Chicago, LA, or
When we
both?
first moved to Los Angeles,
Yeah.
we had one bed. We were subletting a place. We had, there was no way. This was before you were like see pictures of the place you might stay online.
Of course.
Somebody, So I have no idea how we got this place, but it had one bed,
It had a bed.
and so we did head to toe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it didn't get weird.
Yeah. Well, and you're still good friends.
We live around the corner from each other now.
You live around the corner.
Stone's throw.
Your neighbors.
It's weird that we're online right now talking about him when we could be out in the street.
You could be out walking your dogs or your children.
Yeah.
As people do. A weird thing happened. I'm changing sets. A weird thing happened this week with another friend of ours from I was gonna say from camp, because she was actually a friend from camp, but also from Northwestern, Diane Murray. She is a school teacher in New Jersey, and she read the book, and she told me a true story of how the book helped her. A true story in which she, as a school teacher going through the pandemic, there's been a lot of changes, a lot of things that have happened with rules and customs and things like that. And her school principal decreed that for the future, no more classroom pets, no more pets in classrooms. And Diane was upset at this decision, and was upset. Was struggling with how to communicate back to the principal how to deal with this. And so, having read the book, instead of just writing an angry email, she told a story about a student that had a positive experience with the pet, and how this pet chinchilla, that the student who had no focus was having a difficult time in class, but when the chinchilla was in the child's lap, the student was completely focused, could pet the chinchilla and do all of their work and have complete focus, and wrote this as a story. And it has a happy ending. The principal rescinded the decree. Pets are allowed in classrooms thanks to a story, not just, thank you.
Yeah. See,
Carol, I see you.
And that's why, that's what you told me this story we did like, full disclosure, we did like a Jimmy Kimmel like pre-interview, you know what I mean? Where we talked about like, well, what are we going to talk about? Yeah. And you mentioned the story, and I said, that's perfect. You should tell people that, because I think a lot of people that are joining this are not going to be people who are necessarily going to be using stories as part of live performance. So that's the thing. And that's what I want to impress upon people not having read the book. The book has a ton of applications, and whether it's like selling something in a meeting, or just, not boring your family members at Thanksgiving, like it's a kind of, there's a million applications. And speaking of Diane Gottschalk, what's her name now?
Murray. Yeah, Murray.
Yeah. Yeah. So that reminds me, this isn't a story. Maybe you could help me formulate this into a story. Okay. But, and I have to be mindful that my in-laws are on. So really, no, but like, I was like obsessed with Diane Gottschalk in college. Like I wanted to get with her in the worst way.
Yeah.
And she just.
Very charismatic.
But she was having none of it until that one night, the Shanley Pavilion show.
Tell me about the Shanley Pavilion show. Paint the picture for us.
Well, it was rollicking. It was a big comedy show, and that was the show to be at.
People are packed in. It's like a dark, long, thin It's called the Shanley Pavilion. It's like it's a performance venue at Northwestern, but it's really like a death trap. It's like
Yeah.
there's two doors. You'd cram and configure the stage however you wanted. I think, just people are building flats and sets and things like that. So you're doing comedy, and tell me what happened.
I am, and I can admit this now, easily the weakest link of this Meow Show cast. No doubt about it. I'm the worst improviser, but I hold on. I hold my own.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess I was good enough that night to catch Diane's eye, because that was the night, right? She invited me home.
Mm.
But I like, I ruined it. I ruined it.
What do you mean?
I said something while we're making out, and I said something like something really what the kids would call thirsty. You know what I mean?
You said something thirsty.
I said something thirsty. I said something like, I still remember it. I said something like, why aren't we doing this all the time? And I could see the light go out of her eyes, in that moment.
Yeah.
From that point on, that was it. You know what I mean?
Did you learn anything? Was there a takeaway? Like, I assume you didn't see her again?
I mean, I saw her for the rest of college.
But I mean, you didn't like date her. That was your moment.
No, that was it. I ruined it.
Yeah,
I ruined it.
You'd ruined it. So did you change your behavior in any way? Did you?
No, I learned nothing.
Yeah,
I learned nothing, and that's why it's not a story. It's just a memory, and you make that distinction clear in your book.
Well, I think that's why I'm kind of driving you towards that, because if I was to make that into a story, because there's that thing. Like we have these anecdotes, we have these moments, these things that happen in our lives.
Yeah.
My brother is mentioning in the chat that it is said that he got handsy with Diane at French Woods. When he was seven. When he was 7 during a production of Evita, but he denies it to this day. And she, I think, thought that he was maybe making a move on her, but he was just 7, and I think probably looking for a little soft place to rest. But if I was to take your Diane memory story, I love the way you set it up during a performance. I love starting it in the middle of a thing, because you really built yourself up. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when people tell personal stories that are like victory stories about how awesome they are.
Yeah.
When they start the story, they're on top of the world, and they end the story, they're on top of the world. And it's a story about how glorious and amazing they are. I go, screw you. Right. Because I hate those. Those are just self-serving stories. This was a story about.
You started your book with a story about getting punched in the face.
Well, I started at the bottom, but you started at the top. You were crushing it, and you wanted something, and she saw you, and then you had the walk. So I'd maybe build up the walk a little bit.
Build up the walk. I don't remember the walk. It blurs right to the right. But
but you can maybe you can fuse it with some other walk. Anyway, I would say. Then paint the picture, the moment, the kiss, the journey, and then the defeat, the thirstiness.
Right. Yeah. The moment I ruined it.
And then the walk home.
Right.
And the replaying this moment of this fall from grace. I don't know. That's kind of how I would steer it. Would be not just the fall, but the like. You're okay. You're happily married to a wonderful, talented, the best. So really, it all worked out for the best. Yeah. I mean, I once dated someone that didn't work out, and she married somebody named Corey Rosen.
Is that real?
That's for real. Her husband is Corey Rosen. So it was almost meant to be, and it was just we were just off by a lot.
Is that a story, or is that just an anecdote that ends with a rhyme?
That's the end of a story, or it's the beginning of a story, but. Yeah. The upshot is that you definitely made the right move, slipping in the detail that you were the weak link of the Meow Show. That's what Adrian is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was for Winter. And that was something I've never said to him that I needed to say.
Actually, I'm going to use this as a moment to segue into another storytelling thing that I personally think that you, Jason Weiner, of all the people that I know, are particularly adept at doing this. We're both kind of doing it during this talk, which is that like I've seen you do it a lot. I've seen you do it at my wedding. I think you told me about doing it at Shappy's wedding. I know that you did it at the DGA Award. Like you have this way of taking something that is a prepared story, but connecting it with the now, like with the present thing, like talking about the people that are in the audience here. Can you talk a little bit about that? About maybe like how do you do that, and how do you do that so well?
Well, I had to put words that you mentioned Shappy's wedding. You also mentioned the DGA awards, which I want to say thank you for. And then finally, no,
No, do I need to set it up better for people who don't know what I'm talking about? Okay.
No, it's fine. I'm kidding. Okay, so just as an example, at that wedding, Shappy's wedding, you mentioned, Shappy's a friend of mine. Most of these people on here know him. I was supposed to speak on humor, and I decided to sort of make notes at there was like a rehearsal dinner show, and I knew a lot of awkward stuff was going to go down that wasn't going to be able to be commented on. So I didn't perform, but a bunch of drunk people did. And I just made some notes, not taking shots at anybody, but literally just calling them out. And then at the wedding, I said, one definition, people have struggled to define like what humor is, but one definition is calling out a truth that we can all acknowledge, however awkward. And then I just started listing stuff that had happened the night before that everybody had experienced, and the immediacy of it felt funny. Mm-hmm. But I didn't make jokes about it. It was just like calling out a sort of stating an awkward truth or something that feels real. And being able to do that, I think, is a skill that has helped me certainly in like selling situations or I mean, this is like, I think that's one storytelling tool, and it comes from, I think, for both of us having backgrounds as improvisers.
Mm-hmm. And so that's, I mean, not to oversell that this is about a book, but in the book that I wrote, that's kind of a thing that I get into, which is the idea that you don't have to be an improviser to understand how having sort of an improviser's mindset helps in those kind of situations. Because I'm assuming that for that wedding story that you were just talking about, as well as at the DGA and other things, you had a plan, right?
Yeah.
Did you go in with a plan? So this is the situation where like you have a story, like you had a thing that you plan to say. So then, I don't know, it's just kind of
and this is
feel it in the moment. Go ahead.
Advice that you give, which I think is smart, that sort of dovetails with this, is like, once you help people shape their story, take their personal memory moment, shape it into something that feels complete, that feels like it takes you somewhere, and then you advise people to throw it away and not to write, right? Because you have to be in the now when you're delivering it. And why don't you talk about that? Do you give, what about somebody who's not comfortable doing that, or doesn't have that performer's background? Do you have advice for that person?
I totally do. Here's what I believe. I believe this very strongly. And I do realize that maybe, you and I, or people who have done some acting or performing or improvising, might have a more fluent demeanor or seem like we know that. But there is a thing that happens, and it happens all the time, especially in speeches and toasts, presentations, live stories, things like that, where people have this thing where they kind of over practice it. And what I always see all the time is this. I see people in the audience of like a thing, and they're just cramming for the test. They're reading their speech over and over and over because they don't want to screw it up. And they're just so terrified that they're going to screw it up that two things are happening. One, they're missing what's happening now. Like they're missing what people are saying and doing in the moment. And secondly, when they get up on that stage and they start their speech and they start talking about it, even if it's perfect word for word, it feels totally rehearsed and totally stiff. And they're just like you lose them because they're remembering it. They're up here, right? And then they forget a part and you watch them panic. You watch them freak out and go in their head and go, and then the game is over because now this wasn't something that they were talking from their heart, even though it was when they wrote it and they loved every word that they had. So the advice that I always give to people is like, dude, like if that's how you do things, like write it down, read it, but then get rid of it. Because I really believe that like in the moment of giving a talk, of giving a presentation, of giving a speech, that fully half of you needs to be at least right here with the people that you're giving it to. And the rest of it, I trust I will remember it. Like, and I believe that if it's a slideshow or if it's a talk that I'm giving, that enough of the story, I've lived it, I've known it, I've practiced it, that's going to come back. But if I'm not at least here connected with people nodding their head and like understanding it or listening or checking their watch because they're bored, like I've got to at least be somewhat, I want to say at least half right here. That way I can calibrate my story to that situation.
Yeah. And it's a way of connecting with people, that calibration,
Yeah.
that being in the moment. That, Corey's recording this and is going to use portions of it later. So, though, as much as I would like to just be talking about Adrian Wenner for the majority of this, I'm just explaining, occasionally we have to dovetail and talk about the book a little bit so it serves some purpose for you going forward.
Yeah.
Right.
But this will also be recorded for Adrian Wenner's demo reel. I think there's going to eventually be an Adrian Wenner compilation of times that he was mentioned in author events at the Flintridge Bookstore. And this is at least the first, if not the second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or last.
Speaking of the book, I want to go back, and you talked about like being in the moment and connecting with what you're saying. And like, so you transcribe. So for those of you who don't know, Corey not only teaches storytelling, but also performs stories at this thing called The Moth in San Francisco, which is it's a show of storytelling that's wildly popular. And so I read the transcript, and I knew the story vaguely, the Cousin Norman transcript from The Moth. So you included one of your performances, you wrote it down word for word. And in the book, you say you were tempted to correct it, to write it. But I'm so glad you didn't, because I got to be honest with you. I mean, the way you are a very present and in the moment storyteller, that's why you write it, but that's why you're writing this book. And it brought tears to my eyes. That story is, I mean, beautiful and surprising. And it's like, it doesn't go where you think it's gonna, and it gets you in a page and a half.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun about reading the book, is because you have these moments like this that in some ways are pure entertainment, and then you break down afterwards, you use it as an example and you refer back to it and you feel like you're on the same page.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think in part the reason that in the book I also did it like a transcript, like I used a piece of software because I know I couldn't help myself. I was just listening to it and transcribing it. I would have fixed things. I would have fixed my language, my wording, my grammar. But I used like an application that like made it. And I was like, oh, Jesus. Like I just kept it as it was. I mean, I spell checked things that weren't, anyway. But I think that there's a natural way that everybody tells stories. So like, I don't think that there's a specific way of like, this is how every story must be told. I think that there is a way of finding how you talk and how you tell stories. And if I can, I wanted to say, you mentioned something before, you were talking about selling, which is another way that people tell stories. And I mean, you do this a lot. I mean, in TV, as a director, as a writer, as a producer, like you create shows, and a lot of your work and your job is basically telling stories like in rooms full of influential people, right? So
well, yeah,
I'm curious maybe about how you calibrate that and that forum. That's not a theater full of hundreds of people. That's a room with 3 really important, or maybe 1 decision maker, right?
Yeah.
So
when you were teeing that up, I said, well, yeah. And it came out so weird. And it
seemed very natural to me.
It seemed natural to you. Yeah. I was like, you're going to play that back. And I will have gone, well, yeah, in this really strange way for no reason. Yeah. And I guess it's
retake that. We can retake that. You want to go back?
No, listen,
Wenner, can we go back? Can you roll it back? Yeah, he gave us the.
No, I guess my point is, that some of the sort of best victories I've had in rooms come from like wild and chaotic dynamics between people, and trying to sort of capture those and put some structure around them.
What does that mean? Can you give any kind of shape to what that means?
Okay. Well,
I could tee one up if you don't. If you want.
It's mainly because Adrian Wenner is here that I'm thinking about it in these terms. But, we used to improvise movies. That's what we did. And again, because I was the weakest improviser in the group, I sort of hung back, and my role often became I don't know, direct them. I would often call out where it was going. That was the part of it I was best at. Okay. To guide insanity, to narrate it this way and push it that way. And if I was useful at all, that's how I was useful. Okay. There's a show that I'm working and trying to sell, and we're actually waiting right now to find out if it's going to go anywhere. But it's with Cheryl Hines, who people know from Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Rachel Harris, who people know from a bunch of things. They were in the Groundlings together. They've known each other for as long as we have, and they're dynamic with each other. Is that they're absolutely nuts together. They rile each other up. They're really funny, but you cannot get them to stop. And so we sold a project about them and about their relationship. And my role in the room was very much like my role used to be. I was editing. You know what I mean? I just had to interrupt them at the right place, or take something ridiculous that they did or said, or something they went too far with, and give it some meaning as it might relate to the show that we are trying to sell. Nice. So and successfully doing that was one of the best selling experiences I've ever had. It sold at a very high level because there's this feeling of something spontaneous is happening, but it makes just enough sense that I guess it's a show.
So, I'm just trying to think how we might make this into actionable or practical advice for a person.
I don't know.
Because what I think, here's what I think it speaks to. I think it speaks to this, that there's an element in any live interaction, story, pitch, sales meeting, bedtime story to your children, whatever that is, where it could quickly go to chaos.
Yeah.
It could easily go to chaos. My brother Stephen is in the audience here, and I remember this thing when my children were young, when they were your children's age, and he was Uncle Stevie, beloved Uncle Stevie, and he would tell them these amazing, created, made-up stories, and he would come up and be like, "They're still not asleep. How do you get them to sleep?" And I was like, "You have to be less interesting." You don't get a kid to sleep by telling them a great story. You have to learn how not to do, Right. And so I think there's an element of chaos in storytelling, and there's also an element of using what's right there and knowing your room. So in the Cheryl Hines example, where you've got this thing of they're coming in with their energy, and you're coming in there with you're the adult in the room. Right? Mm-hmm. As opposed to other times where I think you've not been that role. I'm thinking of the time that Hayes threw you a football, or I don't know. There was some moment in another pitch where there was just the energy in a sales room. If you go in with your speech and you go in to tell your speech, it's not going to come out the way that you want it to come out. You have to be prepared to put it away.
That's right. And look, Uncle Stuart is a salesman. That's part of his job. It's part of, right? And so I wonder, everybody has these things, these go-to stories that they pull out.
Okay.
For me, one of them is about the store title method of parking.
I know that story so well.
See?
I follow it.
It's a go-to.
I've learned. I called it. My wife is on this call. I called it out yesterday.
There's not a beginning, middle, and end necessarily. Or is there? Maybe there is every time the store title method of parking is used.
That's a good one.
It's really just an example of a kind of a personality and maybe also sort of a way the world works.
Could we invite Stuart Title to tell that story?
Well, yeah, Stuart, will you just talk about the store title method of parking for a second? Here, I'm going to unmute him.
Okay, I'm gonna
define it for those who don't.
By the way, this is inaudible. For people watching, this is not a setup. Uncle Stuart was not prepared.
Can everybody hear me or no?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
No,
now you're muted. You just muted.
You're muted.
Cheryl, you have to
Yeah,
hit the button. There you go. Oh, here, I have to ask you to unmute. Try it now.
Are we good now?
Yeah.
You're good now.
So thank you for this unexpected opportunity.
Make it quick.
So the store title method of parking is very, very simple, okay? Go to the best spot, it'll be there, okay? That's the bottom line, because nobody goes there because nobody thinks there's going to be a spot there. So if
Nobody
it's
believes.
right,
They
you
don't
gotta
believe.
believe.
That's
You
right.
gotta believe.
That's
So you
right.
just go to the best spot, it will be there. You gotta believe. And I gotta tell you, twice around isn't a bad thing, rather than parking 2 blocks away. So that's my theory. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, that is a theory. Can I do a follow-up, or Jason, did you want to
Please,
take it?
please. Yes, please.
I was just going to say, so like if we were to make this, because that's a bit of wisdom. You are a sage in the parking arts. I mean, this is something we've known for a long time. But if you were to tell like, is there a moment that this happened, or a time, that a specific time that you were like, there's this one sales meeting and I was running late and I had to go, and that the steward title parking method helped you?
My first trip away with Cheryl down to Florida,
Let's talk about that.
parking on the strip in Fort Lauderdale, and it was unbelievable, right in front of the restaurant. I mean, how can you get a parking spot? And it was about 9:30 at night, and when we came out at midnight, the car was gone. That's
Wait, the
my
car was
story.
gone?
The car was gone.
It was
He took it an
gone.
unexpected way. He took the best space. It was not legal, was the punchline.
Well, it was legal until 10 o'clock.
Until 10
And
o'clock.
not only that, there was a guy standing there at the parking lot letting me do it, and knew my car was going to get towed.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
But
that's
that
so-
only happened once.
And did that now, what I would add is that guy at the end. I don't know if that guy was there, but I need that guy giving you a tip of the cap at the end. I let you do it.
It absolutely did.
A little look.
A little, right.
that's good.
Did
All
that
right,
happen?
Uncle Stewart, everyone. Let's hear it from Uncle Stewart. Maybe give it up in the chat. Some kudos. That was beautiful.
So yeah, and what I would suggest, and what I'm thinking, and I'm just imagining, Uncle Stewart, in trying to seduce some client to lease a space, uses a story like the one about getting towed, trying to use the store title method of parking as an icebreaker, as a way to make himself seem charming in the situation. What do you think? He's
Well,
nodding. He's nodding. It's usable.
It's absolutely usable, and it's also like it's wisdom. So there's a difference there in terms of that kind of story, because that's a wisdom. That's him giving you a teaching, a lesson.
Right.
And now maybe I have some trust in this guy. Maybe I'm going to hear what he has to say about whatever he's talking to me about in the sales thing. For me personally, I like the Fort Lauderdale version of the story too, because it was
Okay.
it was a concrete, it was a tactile story about a spot. It was on a date or a trip with his wife or girlfriend. I don't know who Cheryl is at this point in the story. And then the car is gone. It's got a twist. It's got a surprise in the end, but still a teaching. Despite that, I always believe that my spot will be there. So no matter what, even if your car is going to get towed, your spot will, it's something like where there's ever since that day, some moment of realization. To me, that makes it, juicy. And I think that's why I remember the story, because it's not just that it does it, but like, I feel like in my own life, I've applied Stewart's wisdom and it's succeeded for me. So I have my own stories of the Stewart title method. I didn't mean to make the whole thing.
We all have the go-to stories, and the question is, how do you use them?
Yeah.
How do you expand them?
Yeah.
Or do you stick them on a shelf? Or is it?
Well, I think a go-to story is a lot of people's thing, especially in sales. It's also really important to remember who you told that story to. I think that's a trap, like a grandparent trap, or something of like, you told me this story before. So there's a little bit of like, inventory keeping.
Yeah. Well, my parents have given me permission to call them out on it. And we, some years ago, decided that we needed a subtle a cue for me to tell them in a way that if they're telling me a story that I've heard before, they're self-aware and they knew that they were going to start doing this as they got older. So they said, we agreed on this. If I'm telling you a story I've told you before,
Yeah.
you just do this. It's a finger on the nose. It's a finger on the side of the nose. And that means, I've heard this before, feel free to taper off or go on to something else.
So you don't have to interrupt them and
It's
say,
finger.
"Dad,
Yeah.
yeah." You just throw down this.
Finger in the
Can
nose.
we all? Can Adrian? If Adrian has heard a story that we've done this, can he throw that down? Yeah. All right. There you go.
Now, listen, I feel like it's a good transition to talk about the next book, because I feel like this should be in it. The advice when you've heard a story before, I don't know.
I think that should be the entire next book.
The entire
Advice for how to get out of telling a bad story. Right? It'll be the counter to this book. Your story's already been told. Will be the sequel to Your Story Well Told. Your Story Poorly Told by Corey Rosen will be the follow-up coming next year. This time, Flintridge Books will have a pre-order in the chat. I love that.
Tell me, because I know that there's no way that this isn't the first of a trilogy. It's going to happen that way.
It has to be, yeah.
So what, do you have an idea for the next book?
Have you seen Tenet?
I did. I found it.
So there are stories in the future that haven't been told yet. They have to come back in the past, and then you find that they're telling themselves while you're experiencing them. That was
the most accurate summary of the movie I've heard.
That is not my future book, but I do actually. Yeah, I'm writing a book now that is tactical, practical, like hands-on applications of this, kind of like we're talking about here. So this book is important that you read this book now, so you know what's coming. So like Tenet, you might be confused in the future book if you hadn't read this particular one. For example, you know. Here's the thing. I teach storytelling classes. So I've had initially people were like, I want to be in the Moth, or I want to tell stories. And then it turned into like, I'm a priest and I want to tell sermons that don't suck, or I want to give a bridesmaid toast that doesn't bore people and isn't just like, oh my God, they're so amazing. Like there's so many speeches that we have to give in our lives that having some fundamental understanding of what a story is will help really anybody. And I think that's the objective. I mean, think about the Oscars, right? How many Oscar speeches are just lists? They're just thanking, and then the best live action short, pair comes up, and they break your heart because they tell you a 30-second story that just melts you, right? Like, to me, that's the whole thing, is that if you can tell a story, just learn the fundamentals of telling any story better, like it can help people in innumerable ways. And that is my mission. That is why I wrote this book. And by the way, I don't want to fully segue from this, but if people do have questions, I think Gail is going to do like a Q&A that's going to start very shortly. So you can go ahead and put them in the chat. Is that the best way, Gail, for that? Yeah, to like put in the chat any questions you want. Yeah,
we're officially segueing into the Q&A portion.
They could be for Uncle Stuart as well. I just want to.
Yeah, we can pop him back on anytime, you guys. Anytime.
Yeah.
I'll say this while we're awaiting a question, if one is going to arrive.
Yeah.
I had this fantasy the other day about the Oscars. Like, why never? And maybe somebody's done this. Why haven't we ever gotten the burn it down speech? The speech that's just about grudges. That's like, you know how I got here? I got here in spite of so-and-so.
Yes.
Why hasn't that ever happened?
Never? Do you think it's never happened?
It was a weird fantasy I had the other day when thinking about like, a petty tyrant in my life, somebody who just annoys me. Yeah. I was like,
I love that. I love that. Would you do a quick improvised version of that, or should Adrian Wenner do it?
I can't do it. I can't.
Adrian Wenner, would you give a quick Oscar acceptance speech?
He did. Adrian, look, we've talked a lot about Adrian. It's only fair that we give Adrian an opportunity to say something.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a question too.
He has a question.
I did ask a question.
Okay.
But now I could just ask it. But so, what's your advice for being in the middle of a story that's clearly you've misread the crowd, you're bombing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
it's not going to work.
Yeah,
and you know where it's headed, and it's only going to get worse. So, my wife just said, like, right now.
You know what?
That's just. Such a mean
I think it's a
person.
great question.
All right, thank you, Adrian. You want to take it offline, or you want to wait on camera?
Yeah, I'll take it offline.
Okay.
I mean, long time listener, first time call.
All right, so this is a good question. Either of us can take it, maybe both of us can take it. But you're telling a story. The story goes sideways, right? You're telling the story, and you realize quickly this is not going the right way. Like, this story is backfire. The audience hates me. I have a specific story of this happening. You want to hear mine?
Yeah.
All right, so I host the Moth, which is a storytelling, like, it's a hat draw, it's a open mic. People come up and they just tell stories from their lives, and we don't know what the stories are going to be. And sometimes the stories are beautiful, sometimes the stories are flawed, and they're always 5 minutes though. That's the beautiful part, because even if a story sucks, you go like, and it's 3 minutes in, and you know that it's coming to an end. And there was one night that there was a story, and it was a wonderful story about a dog, a lovely dog story. And I came up, and for some godforsaken reason, I decided to confess to the audience that I'd eaten dog before. And I did it in a way not to be culturally insensitive, but to be culturally sensitive. I was in a country where dog was on the menu, and I was actually taken as a guest. I'm already losing my audience. Let's see, watch the number drop. But I asked my driver in Vietnam. I was traveling by myself, and he was like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I just want a normal night. I want to do whatever you would normally do tonight." And so I thought he was going to take me like around the town. He took me home to his family, and we drank Fanta with his son. It was like the most lovely one. Like, this is what I do. Like, he honestly took it in, and then he took me out to dinner to a restaurant where that's Tit Kai was on the menu, and I was like torn about this. Anyway, it's not a story that I'm not going to tell my dog eating story, but I'm telling you, the audience hated me. I mean, like, instantly, they hated me, hated my guts. I mean, there was booing, there was jeering, there was mean things, and I knew it, and I read it, and I was like, and I felt it. I felt the pain because I did a horrible thing, right? A horrible thing. But I was telling my experience of it, but people didn't want to hear that because I was confessing to a dreadful thing that I had done. So I doubled down. I talked about how delicious the sauce was. And it was like, I even asked, like, what is this sauce? I go, oh, this is special for dog sauce. Like, this is a special sauce you only eat with, like, I just went all in. So that was my direction, is like, it wasn't going well. So I went deeper into the trouble until I came out the other side of, then they were laughing at me, not angry at me. That was my approach. What would you do, Jason?
Stanislavski says, pick up a prop.
Really?
Yeah, really, actually. I remember learning that in acting class, and it's terrible advice. I was all alone on stage doing Brighton Beach Memoirs in college, which is all, I was playing Eugene, and it was a monologue. I was alone, all alone. And I just, there's a house full of people, and I'm like, oh my God, am I about to forget the next thing? I am. I'm currently forgetting the next thing. I'm currently silent right now. This pause is getting longer. I've got to think of the next thing. And I mean, alone staring at a crowd. And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And then I remembered the advice, pick up a prop. And I walked over, and like, there's a baseball glove on a bench, and I pick it up and I just start playing with that baseball. Helped me not at all. Not at all.
Right, but you did it. You remembered.
Eventually, I got it back. Somehow I wrapped it up. I don't know. I got out of there, but that was the worst one.
I love it. I love it. In reality, I think if you're in that situation, Jackie, in that situation, you I think it relates to the concept that we were talking about in honesty, is that you got to be cognizant of your room. If your room is going the other way, because this could happen in subtle ways where, like, you had the sale, you lost the sale. You had their attention, you lost their attention. This could happen on dates. You like had their attention, and then you realize, I am over talking. I'm monologuing, as I recently learned on dates. Like, when you just are talking too much. And I think my advice is stop talking. End the story, like, conclude the story. If it's going badly, sometimes when you keep talking, you dig the hole. My main advice, if your story is going badly, is to find an ending and get out. It happens in improv scenes all the time, where, like, it goes horribly, and then you go like, it's just time to end the scene. Mm-hmm. And that's my advice. All right, were there any other questions? I just see a lot of dog anger now. Was there anything in here?
Everybody else has, there have been no other questions submitted.
All right.
No.
Oh,
Shelby has a question. Do you want to take
It
that?
doesn't- Here we go.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
this is a Zoom related question.
Okay. What is the best way to handle the start of a Zoom call when everyone is logging on? There's a ton of awkward smiles and silence, and actually make it entertaining and fun. As someone who has to host a lot of Zoom meetings, this is a skill I would love to master, as it's the closest to improv I will get to, says Shelby from Mango Publishing, publisher of Your Story Well Told. Thank you, Shelby. I have a tip for that. Jason, do you ever find yourself in that situation and how you handle it?
The Zoom
I-
meetings?
Yeah.
Well, I would, I think it's similar to what we're talking about. It's like calling out as much of you can, as much as you can of the truth of the moment,
Yeah.
labeling it in non-judgmental ways,
Yeah.
just being able to say. And then there's also the, being able to speak to what's going on with you
Yeah.
in a way that kills time before you get to the meat of it through the awkward part.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
No,
cool.
that was my advice poorly told.
I like it. There should be a book about that. That'll be the trilogy. Advice poorly told. Here's what I suggest, and what I've been actually doing is anything can be a game, right? I think that there's like, you don't have to be an improviser to play a game. And so sometimes I'm in meetings where I'll just do this. There'll be 3 people on, we're expecting 8 people, and I'll just do like, I'll be like, you guys want to play a game? And like, they're like, all right. And I'll be like, all right, if you were any kind of sandwich, what kind of sandwich would be, just like a thing like that. And everybody goes around and sort of answers the question to some degree. And then it's just basically a way that we're sharing, but we're sharing something quirky and funny. And then when people come in, they're not coming into an awkward room. They're coming into a room where people are smiling and enjoying each other. So like playing like a simple thing like that, like what's a if you were any kind of a tree, Jace, what kind of tree would you be? Let's just play.
I'll go magnolia tree.
A magnolia tree. That's one of my favorite kinds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be right now, if I was any kind of tree, I would be a eucalyptus tree. Shedding. Those trees that just are always kind of like peeling. They're always just. That's me. I feel like I'm. All right.
We have a question about what we've learned about storytelling from our kids.
From our kids.
Yes.
Have you? You're a parent of kids that listen to your stories. I have stories from when my kids liked my stories.
Well, I was just thinking about it in terms of our 8-month-old.
Yeah.
And like how there's what I've learned is like there's an instinctive shape to stories. It actually speaks to your point in the book about how culturally pervasive stories are, how many different uses there are for them. It's like they're in our DNA, and they must be, because I watch an 8-month-old, I should say, respond to stories. There's, that, do you ever do Goodnight Gorilla?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Yeah. So like, there's that big moment where she turns on the light to discover all the animals in the room, basically, is what you're saying. But and I say you're saying because the book doesn't really have words, so you have to kind of narrate along. And every time I do that book, just selling that, if you watch his face, he's going like, he feels the build up to it. Yeah. And it's like he waits for the page to turn. He even leans over like this to see what the next thing is coming. Like he understands the shape, the suspense of that's the payoff, that's a climax, that's what you're supposed to be excited about. So I guess the biggest thing I've learned is the degree to which this structure and this notion that we can learn through the shape of stories is like we're virtually born with it. It's hardwired in us.
Totally. There's even a Kurt Vonnegut quote that I heard recently about that, which is about like people effectively telling good stories is like anti-suspense, is like letting there be so much information in your story that if you die in the middle of telling your story, your listener could finish the story for you. And I feel like your 8-month-old effectively knows what's going to happen, like wants it so bad, is waiting for it. And like, if your dad fell asleep, here's what happens. Like you could just go and do it. I love that. here's what I learned making up stories with my kids, which is I think there's some basic structures that people can know about what a story is, of like having like this is life is like this, and then life was like this at the end, like having some kind of change at the end. And I think that that too is kind of an innate thing, and it actually happened at one point where I had a class I was teaching to an animation student, and he had this idea for a short film and he didn't know how to end it, and I didn't know how to end it, so I told it to Henry, my son, when he was like 6 or 7 years old, and Henry was just obvious. He just said the obvious thing that should happen, and I was like, oh my God, that's right. And the student put it in the movie and thanked Henry in the credits. Like it's actually, he finished the movie with the way that Henry ended the story. It was like, because he just did, like a kid sees like, well, this is where it's going, and ended the story in that way.
Did you, because I've sort of been watching the chat box,
Yeah.
did you address the question from Steve about how you handle telling great stories that involve personal details about loved ones, friends, family, spouse? I was just listening to you talk about storytelling from your kids, but I don't know.
Yeah, we missed that.
Great question. I think it's important that those people are okay with you telling that story. Like it's really if you like, oh, I got this hilarious story about my wife last night, like make sure that she's okay with you telling it. Like the other night, I teach classes here in my room where there's a big glass window right here, and when it gets dark out, that window becomes a mirror. And I was teaching a class and it was behind me, and my wife came in the room and started to undress to get ready for bed, and I realized that there was a mirror behind me, and I'm not telling that story because she's okay with me telling that story. Mm-hmm. But that's something that I learned, not to teach classes that way. So I'm now 90 degrees from that direction. Jace?
I did not check whether it was cool to do the Diane Gottschalk story. I didn't check with anyone.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I should have.
You can always apologize.
Yeah. Exactly.
Hey, this has been fun.
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
I want to thank Flintridge Books for putting this on. I want to thank Shelby from Mango Publishing for putting my book out. I want to thank Jason Weiner for being Jason Weiner, and for all of your awesomeness and sharing your stories tonight, and being here with me.
Thanks for writing a book, Corey Rosen.
Is this all it took?
What do you mean? All it took what? To spend an hour on a Zoom together?
Yeah.
Write another book and then we'll do another hour.
Got it. And will you all come back? Everyone come back?
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. So
I just
before we...
to thank both of you so much, and thank everybody else for coming to listen to them. And don't forget to buy Corey's book.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. We'll be looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. And I'm going to stop recording. If people want to turn your cameras on to say hello, goodbye, we can unmute. Is there a way to unmute everybody, or?
Yeah, we can. I think I can.
You can take care of that. And I just want to thank, Flintridge again. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and being here.
Thank you. It was amazing.
Hey.
So much
Hey,
fun.
guys.
Thank you,
Corey.
Great to see you guys.
Wow.
Hey, guys.
Thank you, Flintridge.
We got to get that book. Maybe we'll get 2 copies, one for each of us.
That's a great idea. You can buy it from Flintridge right here. There's a link in the chat.
There's the info one last time, everybody. You can come in, you can call us, you can order it online, and we'll ship anywhere. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.